Hi, Nick from Flowdash here. Today I'm going to show you how you can use the Flowdash API to write custom logic to assign tasks to folks on your team. Now, we've already pushed a few videos about how to assign tasks in Flowdash. We had one around bulk assignment, we had another around automatically assigning tasks, but what if we want a little bit more customization? So today I'm going to show you how to use the API to do that. Here we have a really basic workflow. We have some support tickets that we're tracking, and they move through a very simple process from not started to in progress to done. I already have three tickets in the workflow. One is assigned to myself. The other two are assigned to a fictitious user named John Smith. And what we want to have happen is that whenever I create a new ticket, I'd like that to be automatically assigned to someone on the team. However, I would like that person to be flagged as online and accepting tickets. When that person goes from online to offline, I'd like any tasks that they currently have assigned to them to get unassigned and go back in the pool. And then finally, when that happens, when they go back to unassigned, I want to redistribute those tasks to the other folks on the team. So this type of custom logic can make it even more complex. Perhaps we want to take the priority into account, other conditions, but due to the flexibility of the Flowdash API, we can write code to support all of this. So to get started, I have this workflow, but we're going to create a separate workflow to track the online and offline status of members on the team. And so I started working on that here. I just jumped over to this online offline workflow, and this one's even simpler than the first. It has two stages, offline and online. And what we're going to do is model this by having like a one record per user. So I'll actually just create two right now. And we'll use the assign to field to track the individual. And whoops, grab that one for me. And we'll give this one here to John Smith. And right now we're both offline, but let's flag ourselves as online. And the thinking would be that upon the beginning of the shift, John would go into the product, would mark themselves as online, and then move over to the tickets workflow and start working through the queue. Now, I want to make sure that John doesn't accidentally, select someone else on the team when he is clocking in or out. So I'm going to show you how we can limit John's view of the records in here using roles and permissions. So let's jump over to the team tab. And I have myself and John. John is a collaborator on the workflow. So if I click on the roles tab and collaborator, right now, John can see all fields. He can also create records and so on. So let's say he cannot create records or delete them or export them to CSV. That's not really applicable for this workflow. But this is where the interesting one is the visibility. Should John see all the users or only the ones assigned to him? And we'll say only the ones on him, which also means he can't assign and unassign himself. And by doing that, if I save the changes here, and go back. I'm still an administrator, so I still see both. But I'll switch over to another window that I have that's logged in as John. And as you can see, we'll refresh here because I just made the change. And you can see that there's only one task, and it's the one that is assigned to John. So John can come in here and can mark himself as offline or online as needed. Great. So let's jump back to the other workflow, the tickets workflow. And so here, what I'd like to do again is whenever a new task is created, I want to assign this either to myself or John, assuming we're both online. And the way we're going to do that is through an automation. So we'll create a new automation and call it auto assign task on creation. So we'll say whenever a ticket is created, maybe only, let's say only when it already isn't assigned to anyone. So like the assigned to is empty. Maybe we want to pre-create the ticket assigned to someone. We can still do that. So a new task is created and it isn't assigned to anybody. We're going to automatically assign it to someone. Remember, we have the ability to automatically assign it through our assign to step, but we want that custom logic. And what we'll do is make an API call. Now we jump over to code. So I started a small Rails project before this with two endpoints. And so if you're not familiar with Rails, it's just very basic HTTP REST endpoints. and I hope you can follow along. But the two endpoints we're going to create, one for auto assignment, that's whenever the task is created or whenever a task goes to unassign and we want to redistribute to someone else on the team, and another for unassignment, and that's when a user goes from online to offline, we want to unassign all their tasks. And this fancy ngrok here, this is, if you haven't used ngrok before, it's a really convenient way to run a service locally and make it accessible to the public internet. So it's just, I have it running on the command line here, and you can see that anything hitting these endpoints is being routed to port 3000 on localhost. So jumping back to the code here, let's start with the auto assign endpoint. So whenever, first off, let's grab that URL. I copied it here previously just for convenience, and I'll paste it there. And for sake of example, I didn't do any fancy authorization, but you could always put a bearer token or whatever authorization scheme you want to use there. So I'm going to apply that and hit create. So we now have this automation, but let's go look at what the code is doing real quick. So when the auto assign endpoint is called, the first thing I want to do is go fetch all the users from that user's workflow, but only those that are currently online. And so that's a simple get call to the tasks API. The URL here, flowdash.com/API v1 workflows. This is the workflow ID of the user's workflow. The way you get that is, if we're in our user's workflow here, the online, offline, it's just this ID right here. So I previously copied that into a constant, and that's what I'm using here. So I'm fetching the tasks, but I'm also able to pass a query parameter that says, hey, I only want the ones whose stage is online. So here we're just issuing the get call, and then we get that response back from the server. It's going to be in JSON, so we're parsing the JSON, and then we're just fetching the assign to field from it. We don't care about some of the other fields like the stage or the created at or updated at. We're just grabbing the assign to, and that's going to give us the whole array of possible assignees to choose from. Those are all the users that are currently online. And what I'm doing here is I'm calling the sample method, which in Ruby just gives you a random choice out of an array. So I've got that assignee that we're going to use for that random assignment. And then the API call step in Flowdash, if you respond with the shape of a task, we'll actually interpret that and make that as an update on the task in question. So here in my response body, I'm saying, hey, set the assign to the assignee that we had just selected, and that's what I'm returning in the response body along with a 200 OK. So whenever this auto assign gets called, it's going to run this code, hit up the API, figure out who I can assign to, choose one at random, and then respond so that we choose that person. So let's dive back to Flowdash here. I'll jump to the tickets workflow. We created that first automation, which is on creation. The second one I want to create is where whenever a task is unassigned, we want to automatically assign it to somebody else. So again, that's the idea where someone has gone offline, so they've unassigned all their tickets, and we want to assign it to someone else. So auto assign when a ticket is unassigned. And what we'll do here is we'll say whenever a ticket changes assignee from anyone to unassigned, maybe we'll only do this if it's still an active ticket. I mean, if this is a ticket that was already resolved, months ago, then we don't really care. And again, that step we're going to take, that API call, I'm going to go grab that endpoint once again. So that's the auto assign endpoint. Paste it right there. Apply and create. All right, so we're almost there. We've got the auto assignment on task creation. We've got the auto assignment when a ticket is unassigned. The last one we're missing is whenever somebody goes offline, we want to unassign all the tasks that are currently assigned to them. So we're going to jump over to our online offline workflow and create a new automation. And then this one's going to be, let's unassign tasks when user goes offline. And the trigger this time is going to be whenever a user changes stage, and effectively whenever they go offline, what we want to do is we're going to call an API, and that's where I wrote that unassign endpoint. So we'll grab the URL real quick, and then we'll just quickly walk through what the code is doing. So we'll make that API call, paste it right there, apply, and I think everything looks good there. And what we'll do now is go look at the code. So unassign, what are we doing here? So when we get called from that unassigned task, Flowdash is going to include the task payload. And we're using the assign to represent the user that's going offline. So I'm saving that in a assignee local variable. Next, what we're going to do is go fetch all the tickets that are assigned to this assignee. So I'm again using that same tasks endpoint, but this time I'm using the tickets workflow ID. So that's before we used the user's workflow. This time we're using the tickets workflow. And I'm grabbing all tasks that are currently active. So again, if a task has been closed months ago and it was assigned to this person, we don't want to touch those. And what I'm doing here, we're going to also provide a query parameter that says, hey, I want all the ones that are assigned to the person that we are looking for. And from this point, it's still just a simple GET request. And now we've got that response. That response is going to be an array of all the active tasks currently assigned to this user. For each of those tasks, we want to put back at the Flowdash API and tell Flowdash to unassign each of those tasks. So the URL is going to look like this. It's the tasks API, except we're going to issue a put. And the request body in each of those, what we're going to do is take the current task and just merge in an assign to update to nil, or from JavaScript, that'd just be null. And again, we're issuing that put. We're going to loop through. Again, there's an each here. So for each task currently assigned to this user, we're going to update it to no assignee, and then return a 200 OK to indicate success. And so that's the endpoint that we're calling from this automation. So we've got our 3 automations written. Let's test this out and see if it works. All right, so we're back at John's view of the world. Let's create a few tickets to see if our auto assignment logic is working. So let's create a first one, test P1, create a second one, test P2. You can see that that one actually got assigned to Nick while we were working on it. And that second one got assigned to John. Let's see what happens on the third one. Again, it's a 50-50 split, so we'll see what happens here. And it got assigned to John as well. So it looks like that's working. Let's test what happens when John goes offline. And remember, when John goes offline, we expect it to unassign those tasks, and then we have that unassigned trigger, which is going to randomly assign it between all users that are still online, which at that point will only be Nick. So we expect these 4 tasks to get assigned to Nick when John goes offline. So we'll split screen real quick here. I've got my online-offline workflow, and I'm John. I'm going to say I'm going offline, and shortly we should see these tickets transition their owner, assuming everything is correct, and there it is. So everything that was assigned to John is now assigned to Nick. So I hope this gave you an idea of the kinds of things you could do with the Flowdash API. We're always building new ways to distribute work across the team, but for anything we don't support, you can always use our flexible API to build custom logic.